Today we have the great honor of inviting two wonderful people. Tim Tate is a DC art icon and part of the Washington Glass School directors and founders, correct? And he is being introduced by friend of the ACO, Jamianne Jacobin, who is executive director of the James Renwick Alliance, which is not to be confused with the Renwick Gallery itself, although they are linked, right?
We
Jamianne,
support the Renwick Gallery.
Right, exactly. So without further ado, I would ask you all to mute yourselves. I will be monitoring the chat, so if you have urgent questions, put them there, and I will try to route them to the speakers at a convenient time, and at the end, we'll open up for questions from everyone. Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here with the Art Clinic Online. I think it's so wonderful what you're doing for DMV artists and really highlighting local talent. So that's very exciting. I'm also really happy to introduce a very good friend of mine, Tim Tate. So Tim, if you don't know, is a proud DC native, which is kind of rare around here. And he's been working for with glass as a sculptural medium for over 35 years. Tim was awarded a Fulbright from University of Sunderland in England in 2012. And since the 1990s, he's shown nationally and internationally. Just to name a few of the places, we have the Museum of Art and Design in New York, Boca Raton Museum, Art Miami during Art Basel, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Renwick Gallery, Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Russia, and commercial galleries from DC, London, and Berlin. So I'm not the only fan of Tim's work, as you
I should say it was Hermitage before the war. I really stipulate.
Oh, right. Yeah, we have to clarify. Yes. He's also in many collections. So the Mint Museum, Fuller Museum, Milwaukee Art Museum, and then of course locally at the Renwick and American University Museum at the Katzen Art Center. So hopefully you've seen some of his work locally or in your travels. But as a HIV positive queer man, Tim has been a huge advocate for championing LGBTQ plus rights. And I think that's such an impressive part of his work. He founded the Triangle Artist Group in the early 1990s, which is a local organization, and he's helped curate the very first HIV positive art show here in the region. So he's also designer of the New Orleans AIDS Monument, and he's spoken at Yale University on glass and conflict, specifically about his own activism and path in glass related to his identity. I also want to mention that he's a thought leader of glass successionalism, a concept putting the artistic vision first in glass. This kind of viewpoint has evolved into a Facebook group. And I want to mention this because it's such a huge asset to people who want to learn more about glass art. There's it's kind of morphed into this Facebook page called 21st Century Glass. And there's 8,000 members from 97 different countries. And Tim posts almost daily different amazing artists from around the world working in glass. So you definitely have to go check that out. Recently, he's participated in Glass Stress 2019 at the Venice Biennale, which is quite a feather in the cap, and at the Hermitage, which we mentioned before the war. So I'm not going to get into some of the things that Tim has coming up. I hope to cover that as we maybe later on in the conversation. But Tim, do you want to take it away?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I got to shorten my intro. That was a little much. Okay. Everybody seeing my screen? Now it's fully on there. Okay. Queer glass. Such an odd thing to say, right? Queer glass. This is kind of a history of activism. I say art from the time of AIDS to the new show I'm working on called The Psalms of Utopia, where I predict a queer accepting America at some point. And I would like to say that I started as an activist saying, yeah, but unfortunately activism was thrust upon me. So I can't really say it that way. In the early years, I was just making things. These are the very first time I had just come out. At this point, I was HIV positive. If you notice, you'll see a little angel in this flame at the bottom. You'll see, anyway, a lot of the symbolism on the bowls and things were symbols of myself dealing with being an AIDS positive man in the 80s, which was a scary friggin' thing to be at that time. We don't know what we know now, and it wasn't like it is now, but that was very frightening. By accident, I found this picture the other day. That heart in my left hand is the one that's at the Renwick. No, I'm sorry, that's at the Smithsonian American Art Museum upstairs in the Luce Center. There you go, if you're there. The early work dealt with mostly loss and what I was going through, and I think it's hard to call it activism. You were just trying to deal with what was occurring in your life, and there was so much pain, so much loss, so much chaos at that point, and no one knew what was happening. So in one particular year, I lost 9 friends in a single year. So this is called 9 Souls, One Bowl, and I just wanted to honor them. And this wasn't going anywhere. I had no illusion of becoming an artist at all. I was simply dealing with what was in front of me all the time, because I realized that the act of creating craft was a healing act. Making things with my hands was a healing act, and that's what I did. On the right-hand side, you all may not remember that when we went and protested to get AIDS medications released earlier with ACT UP, that the police would not touch you unless they were wearing yellow plastic gloves, because we were so contagious to them, that to them we were so poisonous they could not touch us without wearing gloves. And you all may not remember it, but I remember it like yesterday. It got those are gloves I picked up in front of the White House after such an ordeal. I had a lot of focus on AIDS in the early part. I didn't stay completely there, but in the early days I did, because that's what I was dealing with. I didn't have a gallery. I was just making work. The one piece on the left is called Two Paths Taken. You see the magic 8 ball dividing the future in the center. The ball above that in the interior tells about my life and how it changed when I became HIV positive. The outer dome is my fantasy of what my life would have been like had I been negative that day. Honestly, neither is better than the other. I make human mistakes in both, but they are stories to be told. So I wrap myself up in those 2 paths and would alternate between those paths as time went on. The one on the right is my own self-portrait. It's called There Are Gods Among Us. Not saying that I'm a god at all, but that if there were gods among us to save people with AIDS, they would be regular-looking Joes like me. They wouldn't be ethereal in the clouds. They would just be regular people, and that's what I was showing on that. And you see it's an endless mirror box, because I wanted to show the hundreds of hidden angels that were actually helping those people with AIDS at the time. Many of you may remember that we were recruiting people from communities to help in almost every way, because you couldn't be buried. Funeral directors wouldn't bury the bodies, and sometimes nurses wouldn't touch you, etc. So I'm going back in time. This is much more focused on utopia by the end of this, so excuse this difficult beginning. Made a lot of hearts, a lot of sacred hearts. The first one I made was to hold my mother's ashes. And then because of that, and me getting to become a glass artist, and in all, I wanted to deal with the subject of AIDS in my way with those hearts. So the one on the left, you see, it is filled with dice, because it was such a chance thing on who contracted AIDS, who did not. It was just a roll of the dice. And I couldn't believe that I'd won every other roll of the dice in my life until that moment. And it took me years to really kind of grasp it. The middle one shows a biohazard symbol, because at that point, everyone, certainly I, thought for certain that I was poisonous to everyone around me. It was very hard to date. It's hard to be around people, because people freak out. I remember in my own family, they used to keep fruit salad in the refrigerator. I took the spoon and ate one, put the spoon back. I remember behind me, my father grabbed the spoon to wash it immediately. And then I kind of realized then the level that people believe that I was poisonous to them. And it's a very odd thing to live as a very young person. By the way, they said I had 1 year to live for 10 years. So I was very young when I was in my 20s. And I was told I had a year to live for the next 10 years. And that is a very difficult way to be a young person. However, you do learn to live in a very existentialist manner and be appreciative for what is in front of you. This one I wanted to see it. I was always told I was going to hell at this point, because at this point the world had turned pretty heavily against me. And so I thought, well, if I'm going, I want to find out. So this was perfectly balanced. Those are 8-inch globes. So they're big. And this thing weighed a ton. It was hard to even lift by myself. I think I didn't lift it by myself. But it was perfectly balanced. So you spun it and you would see, are you going to hell or are you going to heaven? And a preacher ended up buying that. And I said, so are you going to heaven or hell? And he goes, that's not funny. But I thought it was. Spin it and show me. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so now I started looking at the history of queers in the United States. I had been at the Whitney and I had seen 2 paintings by Paul Cadmus in the 40s depicting queer life. And I realized there were 2 tiny paintings in a sea of hundreds of heterosexual paintings and photographs and stories about their lives. And what I had is nothing. So in the very earliest times, you see things from the movies on the right-hand side, like Laurel and Hardy cuddling in bed, things that weren't necessarily meant to be LGBTQ rights, weren't meant to be queer looks, frequently were looked at by us as an image we could see of ourselves because there were so few. The piece on the left is the first time that 2 men were ever recorded dancing together in a video. That is 1896. That is Thomas Edison's studio. And no one knew at that time whether sound, as you see the violin player into the horn, they were recording sound, and the 2 men were dancing who were people from the lab. They did not know if sound and movement would line up. And so these 2 men stood, and for 3 minutes they danced. It wasn't meant to be funny, wasn't anything, they were just dancing. And they could not have realized that a century later, that 3 minutes would be their most iconic moment ever. And there they are on film, dancing forever. That was from the Library of Congress, by the way, which is a great source of things. We had the one on the left, we had AIDS hospice houses, always run by gay people. They were, because we kind of had to look at it for ourselves. And in a hospice in Baltimore, there was a soldier there. He had been a medic, and his family had completely rejected him when they found out not only was he gay, but he also had AIDS, and he was dying alone in this hospice. No one had seen him for 2 months to talk to him. And he said he was going to die in a week, and he did. And he said, will you take my ashes? Instead of putting him on the mass grave in Catonsville, where they threw the ashes of those who died, would you please do something with him? So I made this piece with his story told around that. On the right, I was going to hell. Everyone told me. So I thought, oh, I'm going to sneak into heaven. So this is my plan, to sneak into heaven, because, you don't have to go through the front door all the time. So I figured they were probably wrong, that I had a moral code equal to, or in some cases better than, because I wasn't damning them to hell. And so I could get in the back door because I had the moral code to open that door. On the left, the Mint Museum asked for some work, and I had this piece they have in their collection. I'm sure they have never shown it because they probably didn't really look at it, but the story tells of how I seroconverted, a really difficult story. So I'm sure they got it and they thought, oh my God, people might read this. So it's there. I don't think it's ever been shown, but they have it. They asked for that conversion. The one on the right was sold at a auction at Wheaton Village. And for years, I never told anyone what this was. And I'm not trying to be shocking at any of this stuff. This was just my life that I was going through. So you have to keep that in mind. I wasn't trying to shock. I wasn't trying to convert anyone's opinion about gay people. I wasn't doing any of that. I was simply going through life and coping with myself. I didn't have galleries there. That one there was called the Three of Cups and it sold at an auction, and they all liked it very much. And what they didn't realize is that very top finial, that lozenge on top with the plus sign in the center, is literally the portal window looking into the showers at Auschwitz.
Hey, Tim, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
A lot of these pieces kind of revolve around the idea of going to hell and so forth. Were you raised Catholic or with a religious background at all?
On my father's side, there were Southern Baptists and preachers and one evangelist. And on my mother's side, mostly quiet Hasidic Jews. And neither of them, because they were in such tumultuous religious environments, I was raised as an atheist under them because they themselves had stepped away. So it was fun, kind of interesting to look at the iconography that meant, like I designed Judaica for years. I mean, I like the iconography, I like the symbols, but to me, they probably don't mean what they meant to other people. Like that red cross is not a cross to me. That's a plus sign. That's HIV positive. So, and the Sacred Hearts, to me, my mother was ill and she had pancreatic cancer. So I brought her little tiny hearts every day to make her happy. And after she died, I put that that eternal flame on top because she used to take me to JFK's eternal flame grave as a kid. So that was my version of what the Sacred Heart meant to me. And I had her ashes held in it because I wanted something celebratory rather than funereal. And so that's what that occurred.
Awesome,
so,
thanks.
There you go. So on that one on the right, the first question I always have to ask myself is, who would put a portal into the showers at Auschwitz? Well, the same people who were watching everybody I knew die and do nothing. Nothing. So in my mind, that portal was ever present in my life. Book of Heaven and Hell, that was just pure fun. I just want to see if they were right. I could spin it as many times as I wanted. And that was a great piece. It was shown here at Zenith Gallery in DC 1,000 years ago. And at Artomatic, yeah. We are now in the I was at a bar in mid-90s in New Orleans, and the person next to me was saying, "What do you do?" I said, "Marsh." She goes, "Oh, we are the committee, the search committee for doing the New Orleans AIDS monument." And I said, "I got a great idea. I have that already done." And I, at that moment, drew this on a cocktail napkin. It looks slightly different. I'm not quite as uniform, and there were words in some of them, not just faces. But however, that drawing on that napkin and that cheesiest bar in all of the French Quarter, after years, eight years later, became this. And that 8 years was really challenging years with different committees and the city council. And I had, the city council would have me fly down with 3 days notice and no one would show up. And it was a long 8 years, but it finally got built with the help of Mitch Godet and his team in New Orleans. So.
Hey, Tim, I know we've talked about this before, but how many AIDS monuments are you aware of in the U.S.?
There's the Grove in San Francisco. There is one in Key West. There's one in Toronto. I hear there could be one in Provincetown, but I haven't seen it yet. And I only heard of it. I really have never come across it. So there are very few AIDS monuments in this country.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that this is like one of maybe half a dozen.
Well, someone said to me that, there's no diabetes things either, right? And maybe that's how it's perceived now. We have to keep in mind that now perhaps people have PrEP and people don't see it as tragically fatal. Not just fatal, but you would die horribly, right? You weren't going to just die. You were going to die horribly and take everyone you love with you. So it's hard to imagine now, so it's softened out. But I do think at the height of it, the reason it wasn't happening is because that means again, you were supporting, queer people. And I think that that was too tough for most city councils to get through, for whatever that reason was. Hopefully that will change considerably.
Can I ask you a question? Is there any movement for doing a DC one? During my time as an internal medicine doctor, I remember rounding on about 30 patients on the weekends that had AIDS, and I saw so many beautiful people dying, and I couldn't offer them anything except some antibiotics for whatever intercurrent infection they had. And it was just I wish I had known you then, because it would have been healing for me.
Well, thank you. Dr. Fauci was my first doctor, so when he was being attacked so frequently, it was horrible to watch, because I knew what a great and kind man he was all through COVID, and to see him be smeared after all he had done was hard to watch. But yeah, I was back in. I've lost track of the number of clinical trials and protocols. It was my way, because I was afraid to let my health insurance know that I had AIDS, because they would have dropped me. That was legal at the time. I assume it probably still is. Don't know.
And I think that's why we need a monument.
Well, there we go.
It was an incredible time, and there are so many parallels in the pandemic.
There's a guy named Jay Fistet who was on the Arlington County Council, and he wanted one in front of the Whitman Walker Clinic that was in Northern Virginia. I don't know if that ever occurred. I put in a design for it. I think, when you're in Whitman Walker Clinic, giving money for a memorial is probably tough when you're trying to pay doctors and get medicine, so I think that one died a quick death. By the way, this is in Washington Square in New Orleans, right in the French Quarter. So if you're ever down there, you can go. Or if you happen to watch, what is it, New Orleans SVU, or is it one of those cop shows in New Orleans? And they always use this as a place where people meet nefariously to make deals at night, because they always have to tell me when they're standing in front of them. So I always get these little notices that I will be on New Orleans CSI or SV, one of those.
And are these illuminated?
It is illuminated. There's lights behind that at night. And of course, when the television crews are there are lights all over. They have it lit in 47 different ways. This was supposed to be the end of the candlelight vigil in New Orleans, because every year they would have a candlelight vigil on World AIDS Day ending at this spot. And so there are lots of pictures online of people crying in front of it, or with ribbons on it, or Christmas, bouquets on it, all kinds of different things that it happens. Originally, instead of all faces, and these are molds of faces of people who were affected by HIV, either family member or those in New Orleans. But at one point, there were supposed to be some names, because this is a double-sided one, and the names were like, father, son, teacher, mother, friend. Those were on there that anyone, however their loss occurred, they could go there and they could feel the loss at that spot. So. But it's fine the way it is. It's a beautiful monument. In the future, we want to have a place where we hide from no one, because if everyone hid in the bushes, that's what everyone did for all those years. And here is just a little vision of, we want to never hide in the bushes again. This is where I learned that if I did a video of my eye, which has a deep Irish fold on it, that it looks like an elephant's eye. So I don't use my eye anymore in videos, but this is 42 inches across, huge cast cameo piece with videos. And so, yeah, it's big. It's big, Barbara. It's just exactly the size you put there. All righty. We rose up. This was part of the a show and called Transparent. And Transparent was a show that was strangely the first queer show in glass ever. And it was put by Megan Cole, who was the curator at the Liberty Museum in Philadelphia. And it traveled to the Tacoma Glass Museum and began a great relationship with me in the Tacoma Glass Museum, who I love and adore. And this one is was called We Rose Up. Now, I do a lot of endless mirror pieces, but there's a reason why I use endless mirrors mostly. If you look into that endless mirror, everybody knows you do not, though all those figures are not in that mirror. There's only the one. We know it's a trick of our eye, but you can't help but see it. But also, since we know it's not there in reality, then we can give it whatever kind of physics or psychics we prefer. So for me, I saw all those people I lost over the years. There they were, alive again, saying, thank you for remembering us. We're doing okay. And I want to remember them. And I remember them by this, because when I look back, I just think of the faces of those people that were lost. So that's why I tend to use endless mirrors. I probably shouldn't tell anybody this. I'm much more depressed. My normal talk about my art is not nearly as depressing. So it was just what I was going through. I'm not trying to be purposely depressing at all.
Tim,
Backside ball. Yes, ma'am.
oh, before you move on, that last piece that you were just showing, is that the piece that was in the Tacoma Museum when the biography video of Lloyd Herman?
This
That's
and
a
this
fun
this
scene
is
right
this is the exact one. Lloyd Herman, who is the founder of the Renwick and the person who saved the Corcoran and the Renwick buildings for the city over the years, and he was Jackie O's best buddy, and he did a lot for the city that was so quietly forgotten by many, but not by us, because he founded the Renwick Museum and also was the first curator. And an amazing, gentle, kind, astounding soul who became a friend and a huge supporter of my work over the years. And so when his husband was extremely ill, and his husband did pass, as did he in the last year or so, while he was showing his husband this piece in Tacoma, there happened to be a film crew there. So I have this wonderful moment where his husband, who can't walk anymore, is in a wheelchair, is being shown this piece for the first time to show, that queer work is coming out to support. We've been married now for 40 some years, and isn't it nice that it started to happen? So I cherish that little video moment. All right, next. All right, Dockside Boys. We don't always have to hide the shadows. One day we can step into the light. But when we did hide the shadows, a lot of people hung at the docks in New York. I just thought I'd give a nod to two friends of mine who passed, who that's how they met. And I had a little sculpture the two of them put in there. So there it is. And again, they're showing the countless people who had to hide in these shadows. They're there endlessly in there. Not everyone wants to meet on a dock in the middle of the night. It would be really nice maybe to, hold hands at a church meeting. I don't know, maybe not that, but whatever. I put in Mrs. Dalloway here. This is not on yours, Jamie, and I added it because, Mrs. Dalloway was a figure in literature who was a queer woman who was horribly having to pretend to be married to this man because she lived in a time when you could not be an openly gay woman. And I'm showing the exact moment where, after cutting fresh flowers, which was her designated duty every day, she threw the cut flowers down and went to New York to buy the flowers that day, which is the first line of that book, and also the first line of feminist literature, because she was taking control of her own life. In that book, when she talks about her life pretending to be straight or being who she truly was, and the exact line she says, if I choose between Richmond, the suburb she lived in, pretending to be straight, or death, I choose death. And of course, Mrs. Dalloway, just like Virginia Woolf, the writer of this, filled her pockets with stones and went into the river and drowned. Both she and the character did that as a prescient moment of what Virginia Woolf's life must have been like. Okay, here's the piece that was at the Hermitage. There it is, written in Russian over on the side. It was on the front of their catalog at the Hermitage, which I was very happy about. It's 32 inches across, solid cast lead crystal. It weighs more than Jamianne, and that's not much. But it's a very detailed piece, and I wanted to show relationship. And my relationship I'm showing here is the Emperor Justinian in 541 AD lived in Constantinople and was one of the very first people to actually contract what later became 800 years later the plague in its earliest form. It took 800 years to hit Europe heavier, but back then it hit Emperor Justinian, and while he survived, 1/5 of Constantinople did not. And at that point, he said when he looked into a mirror, he would see those people looking back. Well, that was that plague, but I've been through 2 other plagues. I've been through AIDS and I've been through COVID and lost people to both. So just like we rose up in that endless mirror, we see those people looking back here, all those faces. And here they are. We're here. Please don't forget us. And this is our way of remembering who they are. So there's all those dozens and dozens of faces peering out at you. That was the first piece to ever hang in the Hermitage that actually mentioned AIDS. And the only reason I know that is because I got fan mail in Russian on Instagram. Apparently they can't do Facebook, but they can do Instagram now. And so a lot of people sent me Russian text to tell me about it. Oh, is that right? Yes. All right. Okay, we're gonna also I did a lot of memory pieces. The one on the left, Alan Turing. Alan Turing, I'm sure you all know, was the mathematician who broke the Enigma code with the Enigma machine. You've probably seen the movie. He was a hero, a major hero in the world until it was discovered he was gay. And then he was chemically castrated, completely shunned from society, and ultimately kills himself by taking a bite from an arsenic-laden apple, which is why the Apple logo on your computer is a bite out of an apple, an homage to Alan Turing. Next, Matthew Shepard. And what affected me so badly I was lucky enough to be at the National Cathedral, where he was one of only 2 people interred who weren't religious people, he and Helen Keller. And I went to this at the National Cathedral, and it was packed, completely full. There were 100 and more, a couple hundred outside the doors waiting to see if they could hear. And that was a very special moment. I was there to support his family and him, and he is interred in the National Cathedral. If you drive by, think of that. And on the right, the great Marsha P. Johnson, who was the first drag queen to strike back at the Stonewall riots and is legend in the queer community and the drag community. And she was the Earth Mother of all on Christopher Street, and she passed away in 1992. But I want to pay homage to her here. And so there is my homage to Marsha P. Johnson. That actually, the actual one, Jamianne, this is my mock-up of it, sold to a JRA member recently, bizarrely. I just want to show how our reflected history is and how our lives are examined so heavily. I mean, trust me, if the world was queer and we were constantly looking at straight people for any flaw we could find a few. And you would be so tired of asking permission from us for getting married, so it's really hard to switch your place and take a look what it would be if you were queer, because you would be exactly like you are now. You would look like you do now. You would be married to someone who is just a different sex than they are now, but they'd be just like that person. I'm just saying nothing would be different, except for that there would be people viewing you through a magnifying glass constantly to find your faults. So I was just pointing out that it just gets a little bit tiring. You don't want to ask permission to live your life from anyone, nor will I ever again. But there it is. Okay, so we are now entering into, many of you know Joyce Scott. Joyce Scott is an old friend of mine. I love her to death. And I was getting into a gallery world that was being a little too beholden to a single person. And so all the art had to kind of switch to make this person happy. And I didn't want to do that. So I left that, and I left it by calling Joyce. And I said, Joyce, who, by the way, is a MacArthur Genius Award winner for her art in 2016. I said, Joyce, I don't know anybody ever who could help me more. Can we do a piece together? And she said, yes, come up. Let's talk about it. I was already up there. I brought her Thai food. I knew how to get to her. So I went up there and she goes, well, can you take me to the gallery? Because there's a photo shoot there today. And if you take me to the gallery, we can ask my gallerist if we can do it, because I'm all for it. So we go to the gallery and there are several people there, and there's an African-American woman on each side of her. And we're talking about her, the creation of this. And she turns to Amy, she says, Amy, Tim and I want to work on a project. Is that okay? And the woman next to her says, wait a minute, you're Tim Tate. I was like, oh, thank you, God. I mean, it turned out that was my first curator, Lowry Sims, who's legendarily famous as a curator in this country. She was my first curator at the Museum of Art and Design, and remembered me for them. On the other side was Leslie Hammond, another amazing curator. Both live in Baltimore now. I couldn't have asked for this art moment of the world. And it just meant everything. Talking art moments that as an artist, we kind of look for signs. Are we on the right path? And there was a time when I thought, what am I doing? I wasn't making any money. I was really young, and I was deciding to try to be a full-time artist, and I don't know how it was going to go. Maybe I should just stay with what I was doing. I did a lot of development work for different organizations, and I was walking through the Names Project. And if you don't know what the Names Project is, it looks very similar to the piece here on the screen. The Names Project was quilters would put 3 foot by 4 foot or 3 foot by 3 foot panels about people they had lost to AIDS. And they put this panel sewed together in front of the White House, and it covered the entire mall. It was massively huge. And so I went down by myself because I knew I couldn't. I'm really good. I've almost choked up here. I don't want to choke up again. So I'm trying to make this cool. But you would walk through and you would see people that you knew who died, panels about them. And you would just look at this expansive quilt covering the entire mall and just trying to visualize so many. And during that time, they were having people read the names. I think I've forgotten how many at the time, 2,400, something, not these mass. I forgot what it was, but they were reading names of people that had passed, or the people who got the panels. So as I'm walking through by myself and just kind of seeing friends, right in front of the very center, in front of the White House, I looked up, and it was at the exact moment where Keith Haring was reading Robert Mapplethorpe's name. This was a month before Keith died. And I thought this was a sign. This was somebody telling me to go forward, because we're losing some of the best, and maybe I could go forward and try to make a difference as well. So that moment is electrified in my head forever. And so I didn't mean to tell that story. I'm moving on. I'm going to move on. Anyway, here's the wall with Joyce. It's a 10-foot wall with all with cast glass. These are bas-relief tiles that she and I made in my studio. You'll see some of the pieces are her beadwork. She works in glass beads. Some of them are my cast figures. But the entire thing is called Next. And she called it that because we decided we would, whatever was happening in the news that day when we were doing it, or that time, that week, we would react to what was going on. And it was a challenging 6 months towards LGBTQ and towards African-American and to women. But we're going to show you, all right? Here's a few of them. On the left, many of you who live in New York know about Hart Island, or have seen the show Pose. Hart Island is an island just a couple hundred feet off the shore of New York City. And in the 80s, 90s, the families of people who had AIDS would not collect their bodies because they had disowned them totally. And those people are buried on Hart Island across that way. There's a huge mountain, and under that are the bodies of the people who passed. I go there. I've gone there twice. I go there and usually leave something under the dirt behind. It's a very challenging place to be, to see all the people that are there only because their families disowned them. On the side, just a remembrance pieces, all the people who died of AIDS. It's there. You can see the bas-relief glass is kind of swirling around there. On the left is Club Q in Colorado. 5 people dead from a crazy shooter. On the right are 49 stars, one for each person at the Pulse nightclub who died from people who had their own internalized homophobia, and it's horrible to have to witness this. It turns out, by the way, the director of Urban Glass lived right next door to Pulse, right near it when it happened. That was deeply moved by it. So we were going to partner with her on an upcoming project that unfortunately didn't turn out. But you never know who is affected by these things. Here, oh my God, thank God we're in a utopian queer future. Here we go. It's the beginning. This is gay marriage is now codified in the Constitution, which means it's very hard to get rid of gay marriage now, because I anticipated that my husband and I would not be married much longer. I just thought that the Supreme Court would erase our marriage. I used my straight studio mate, and I pressed him into service here and said, "You're going to hold my hand, goddammit." And so we put it on in. And later that day, we went to Trader Joe's, and we were chosen as couple of the week, by the way, Trader Joe's. So his wife was so proud. Anyway, that's our hand, and that's in bas relief. That if you put your hand down, it would feel feel like a glass hand. It's quite thick, you know. On the left is a great change in society. There are 23 different symbols of sexuality, because now, instead of always having to conform to some other tribe, you can pick your own tribe and identify with. And this, I'm always asked by straight people, why do they need so many? Because we do. We're not asking you, we're telling you. I think you have to understand that we don't need to always ask permission to have the 23 ways that we want to identify. No, I'm not saying that anyone here, I'm not trying to be mean to anyone. I'm talking, this is a generalized societal thing. And on the right, I'm just showing, transgender bodies can be beautiful too. I just want to have those things out there. And we do need to have a tribe. And if you've never had a tribe, you would understand. If you have tribes all your life, it would be a quizzical thing to understand. But trust me, you need your tribe to feel whole. Okay. In my utopian queer future, this is in the Psalms of Utopia, the show I'm putting together. I like to predict the future. So why not? Pete Buttigieg is president in 2032 in mine. I put in there. And also on the right, Marie Turner, who is, believe it or not, the first, right now she's in the House of Representatives in Oklahoma. God help you. She's the first she will be in 2034, in my prediction, the first non-binary Somalian American woman to serve on the Supreme Court. So there we go. Got my fingers crossed for her. I like predicting a queer utopian future, because if we can't imagine it, it may never happen. And we're not trying to take over the country. We're simply trying to be a part of a country that has never fully accepted us by any means. So now I want to start that process. Well, I think this is my final slide. We were working with Urban Glass, and this was an homage to Marsha P. Johnson that was going to be in Brooklyn. You see the New York skyline right behind us. I wanted to make it our Statue of Liberty. Our Statue of Liberty, the regular Statue of Liberty didn't really welcome us so much. So I made this our Statue of Liberty. And this is to the famous drag queen Marsha P. Johnson and queer activists. And I thought it was time to fully crown her. So we have this crown here, and it would have been there. And you could actually stand in front of it and hold your phone out and make the crown be on you. And we were honoring her astounding memory. She always wore flowers. So on that spandrel in the center there between the two parts of the crown were dichroic glass flowers in a variety of colors. So you stood underneath of it and you were bathed in the rainbow flowers of Marsha P. Johnson. And at some point, I still would love to do this, and don't know if I can, but we'll see. Now, I'm going to stop our share. I think that's my last one. I'm pretty sure. Yep. I'm going to stop sharing and go back to you guys. Here we are.
Thank you so much, Tim. I actually, I got to see the PowerPoint in advance. And so I had a few questions for you.
Go for it.
And of course, anyone else who wants to ask questions, you can put them in the chat. Or just let us know. But I wanted to ask you first about your use and this might seem strange because you know me well and we know each other, but your use of color from when you're talking about like in your work that's more about remembrance versus your work that's about this optimistic utopia. It totally changes.
Yes.
And I want to know if you can talk a little bit about that.
So I think whenever I do those kind of white backgrounds, like on the piece behind, we're talking about such serious topics that to do them in bright colors almost seems counterintuitive in a way. We have color, of course, to pop out, to make something pop out of something, but I really wanted, when I have a utopian future, bring all the color you can out. I want that to be everybody to feel that incredible blessing of all these colors and the joy of what that would mean. And I'm hoping that people feel that same joy that I do when things change and we don't have to hate this group of people. It gets really old. You know, I mean, I hatred in general is tough right now in society. If you're African American, if you're a woman, if you're queer, there's so many different ways now. If you're Muslim, I mean, there's 100 ways now that you are not a regular citizen, and I have a real problem with that. So hopefully we can all together change that to a degree.
And then my other question, and of course, sorry if anyone else, can chime in, is about, so this PowerPoint was so wonderful in reflecting on, one body of work, but you have so much other work that you have not shown. And
I know that was really about 1/10 of what I've made in the last few years. So I know I didn't show it all. I mean, how long y'all want to sit here and listen to me say this stuff, right? Not much. So I just kind of put the pithier ones. I mean, there is a lot of work I have, and not most of it is not dealing with queer issues. Sometimes I just love over the top Victorian techno fetishism. Steampunk. I mean, I love all these kind of ways of making that work of mine. And sometimes just beautiful, achingly Victorian, beautiful things. So I do that, but I never lose sight of keeping the activism going ever. And so from the beginning, throughout that, whatever I'm making, I also put in something like that. And frequently people don't see it because what gallery is going to put up my queer work?
Well, that's exactly what my question was. Did you, in your career, do you find that you have to make certain types of work for a commercial market versus work that you really want to make or resonates with you that might be for a museum?
And is that interesting way it's an interesting way to ask that, but let me say, it doesn't quite go like that. You don't think, oh, I'm going to make stuff to sell. It doesn't what happens is you're making your work, and then you're at a gallery and you're noticing that certain types sell better than others. So you just sort of drift towards these things without realizing the source of why you're doing it. And occasionally you catch yourself and pull yourself right. So in this case, I pulled myself way right on purpose. I wanted to reset and not just be decorative. Although I have nothing against decorative arts. I love decorative arts, but I'm just saying for myself, I needed to completely reset. Hold it. Here we go. How much is design executed by other artists, and how many they all come out of my studio? There's nothing. I don't think. Is there anything? Oh no, that's not true. Occasionally, I'll have people do blown hearts for me because I don't blow. In the old days, I did. So the earlier hearts, I made at different places, but I was always present. And usually, even that. This time, I was at a residency at the Tacoma Glass Museum last month, and at that point we made 6 hearts. I was also down at Duncan McClellan's in Florida a couple months before that, and made another 10 hearts. So it depends. For the most part, everything's out of this studio, and after I've blown the heart, I bring it here, clean it up, sandblast, do all kinds of things to it as well here. I have a pretty well-equipped studio, not for blowing but for casting.
You do have assistants. I'm sorry, Jamianne. Go ahead and I'll ask.
No, I was just going to say kind of the same thing. I think that was a good question, Barbara, because in glass blowing, it's very common that you would have a team of assistants, which I think is what you were about to say. So go ahead. Do you want us to
Oh,
ask a
yeah,
question?
that's what I
Mariana?
wanted to ask, if there are students around, and because it's a glass school also. And so you would think hopefully you're getting some help from the students while they learn from your masterful design.
I ain't letting them touch my stuff. No, we have very accomplished artists here. You've had them on your series. Michael Janis shares the studio with me, Erwin Timmers, and many artists in the back. I'm surrounded by artists and frequently have an assistant, at least part-time, throughout the year. I haven't had one for several months, but I think I'm getting one again. So they help me on that as well. So there we go. If you know someone who wants to be a half-time assistant, I'm ready. Send them out.
Oh, Andrew just asked a really
Here
good
we
question in the chat. Want to read that
The-
out loud, Tim?
Yeah, I see it right there. Do you feel the queer community is underrepresented more so in the glass community compared to other mediums? 150%. It's baffling to me that I can name every queer person in glass on a hand versus the thousands that are making glass right now. Now, saying that, I shouldn't even say that, because right now, Flamework has a huge following of people, and I can't even name them, and they are probably flush with queer people. In the regular queer world, now all this probably changed 5 years ago, but up until then, well, I'll give you the story. When I first went to Penland in 1989, my vision was I would be a queer glass artist with another one. We'd have our studio together, and we would go forward as a partners with this glass studio. I wanted that more than anything in the world. And there was Sparky. Sparky was this young man who was there taking classes. And I thought, this is good. Thank you. It is Penland in North Carolina. Thank you, Jamianne. And so Sparky was just as cute as a bug. And I thought, this is it. This is it. My dream is coming true here. I can't believe it's happening. And so I go, and the big dance, if you all been to Penland, is on the first Thursday, so everybody can meet. So I'm going to go see him at the big dance. And that's on Thursday. On Wednesday, he went to, I'm not going to name the name of the shop he went to, but a very famous artist shop, took out newspapers and blew his head off with a shotgun. And I never saw another queer man for 15 years after that. Not one in glass, not one. Now, it's got to be better now, just because the world seems to be better. But even when they did the transparency show, it was very difficult. And that was, what, 5 years ago? Very difficult to find enough. Now, queer women, it seems to be a little bit better for them. Queer men, very challenging to use the regular outlets for selling glass art. You could probably do it in a regular fine art gallery, which everyone's going to have to soon anyway. They're not going to be glass galleries much longer. So yes, so everyone's going to have to transition to the fine art world. And so now I'm sure there'll be others. If you go down to Art Basel-Miami and all the fairs, it is filled with glass. I mean, it is the material of choice by so many people. My God, Ai Weiwei and Olafur Elias, and everybody's working in glass now. So it's going to filter back towards queer people, and they're going to finally be allowed in and finally be allowed to use glass, because a lot of galleries wouldn't even let you in the early days if you had glass art, because it was considered a craft. So I'm praying, I'm hoping, and Andrew, if you're one, if you need any pointers or help, give me a call, because I know how tough it is to get that word out. It sucks. Who is that?
Tim, I know a lot of students have a hard time, and as me as an instructor as well, or have a hard time explaining to students like how to let art go out the door, especially with work that is so personal to you. How do you advise students to become comfortable with letting art go, let art sell, and leave your studio?
Something's wrong with me. I've never kept any of my work. I have one Sacred Heart that turned brown, and so no one wanted it, but I love this little brown Sacred Heart because it didn't like any of the others. I figured these are my children, and they have to keep their old man, in the lifestyle of which he's becoming accustomed to. So I want them out the door and earning money for Papa. So I have no problem. Once I have it, and once I have a record of it, you see, I can share this record with you all, right? I don't need to have the work with me, because I can't tell you how much work, hundreds and hundreds of pieces. And how would I have kept them? How would I have shown them? Why would I have done it? You know what I mean? I'm going to try to, yeah, I'll do it the other way. Oh, we have another question. In other words, let it go. You know what? You're a glass artist. Make another. You made one, you can make two. I swear to God. Let it go and make that money support you to make 2, 3, and 4. All right, Tim, beautiful. Can you talk a bit about the business side of your practice, applying residency, shows, websites, social media? Certainly. The business side of this, one of the things that bizarrely is important is social media. And it is important because it is people who don't remember before social media will have a hard time understanding there was no way to communicate with anyone outside of letters and magazines in these ancient times. However, now you have a free venue to contact all these people. And I'll give you an example. Once just give you how random it is. I put a video of Nora the cat playing the piano on my Facebook page. I'm not ashamed. I don't care. It was a goddamn cute cat. It was a good video. I don't care. So I put it on there, and this guy popped up and said, "Wow, that's a cute cat." I said, "I'm here at my museum." I said, "Museum? What museum?" And 24 hours later, I had a show with Damien Hirst, Zhu Bing, dozens of other hugely known artists at the Museum of Art and Design, because that person who saw me was the director of the Museum of Art and Design in Columbus Circle in Manhattan. 300,000 people came to that show to see that piece. And when I saw him on Facebook and he said I should put it, I said, "Museum? What museum?" He goes, "Yeah, we're working on a show." "Tell me, I bet I got something for it." He told me the name of the show, and I said, "Sure, I got something." And I didn't, but I scribbled something real quick and held it up. And that is how I got into the show called Dead or Alive. They still have the catalog at the gift shop there. And it was a massive thing because David, oh my God, the director, I can't remember his last name. Anyway, the director of that, that was one of his first shows when they moved to Columbus Circle. And it was one of the biggest attended shows they've ever had. So yes, use your social media. Oh, that's one thing. All right, using social media. I do residencies to connect to the places doing the residencies. I usually don't need to do a residency. In fact, I really don't like residencies for the most part because I have everything I need here. So I only go to connect. So I would go to, like I went to Tacoma because I really wanted to connect to the museum because I love the people over there. I have a website. I really should update it, but really it's all on Instagram now. And I think that's Instagram. In fact, I switched to Meta instead of Twitter, and I like not Meta, Threads it's called. I'm on Threads now because I like it because all the mistakes I made on Twitter and Instagram and the other ones, I don't have to make on this one. So I've already had Gagosian liking one of my pieces, and I've had, Juxtapose Magazine asked me a question. So I because there's so much fewer people on Threads, my stuff is getting so much more notice because they're there and I'm there. So I would say start that social media part. Websites, I don't know you need so much. Shows, you should always try to be in a show. I don't care where it is. You have no idea who's going to come to that show and see your work and how that's going to work. Every time you give a talk, every time you give a show, put work out there. Hopefully, well, unless it's something you don't have work for, but I always try to as well. I always have professional photos, never do cell phone pics. Even if you think they're really good, don't do that, That's just can't. The piece at MAD, the one that Susan and I gave to MAD, no, I wish it was, Fred. The piece that I had at MAD was the series I had with Mark Petrovic, the series of 9 domes, one of them video, but they later did get the piece that you had. Yes, I was in there before I was in your collection, Fred. But that one, they did show, the one who showed that after, Jennifer Scanlon had a show that put that piece of yours into the show that Jennifer Scanlon curated at the time. It's amazing. I remember these names from, I can remember everybody from 20 years ago. But however, where my car is parked is up for grabs. One of the things you have to do if you are in business, I don't have a safety net. I don't have a family who can save me. I just don't have that safety net. So for me, I have to always kind of be looking for opportunities. So you must make sure opportunities are available to you. Right. In fact, Kevin, pick a month and a date, and I'll come down for that thing you were talking about. For instance, I mean, I'll be more than happy to come on down for that. So just let me know. Oh, hey, how you doing, lady? So I got a note from the director. Anyway, she said she's interested in the show. If you set up a date, I'll come down. Not in the winter, either October, early November, or in the spring. Okay, sorry about that. See, I'm doing business right here, sitting here. Those are some wonderful clients there. That's true. Fred Sanders and Sue Sanders, who are on the board of Urban Glass, and in fact, Fred Sanders is the actual chairman of the board of Penland School of Craft, in case you're wondering. And he and his wife have been the biggest supporters of me my whole life. If ever I had things at auction, for fear that I would be embarrassed, they always got it, which I totally appreciated. And honestly, they're just friends, and they're dear, wonderful, supportive friends, and they've been behind me the whole time. And I would say to you, if you are a nasty person, you better be the best artist in the world, because you will never get ahead if you piss off everybody on your way up. And if you're just a nice person and try to connect everyone else, and also show other people's work and talk about them, and all, it doesn't have to always be you. I would say that is a really good thing to suggest. And if you can do it, you'll probably get successful. We have something called an artist covenant here. And what that means is there's a group of 9 of us who are in this covenant, modeled after the New York Surrealists. And that we all have this code. One is a writer, several are artists. And what the covenant says is, if one of us succeeds, all of us will succeed. And so what we do is, if someone has an article about them and they're talking to the press, they also mention, oh, have you heard about this person, another person in the covenant? Or if you have a show, like for instance, I'll give you an example. The show I had at the Museum of Art and Design, the one I got online by putting the cat up, after I got it and was going to be in it, I called a friend of mine and he said, oh, I wish I could have been in. I said, let's see if we can. I called the curator and I said, can I do it with this other very famous friend? And he said, sure, no problem. So now I had a show and he had a show, and I didn't lose anything. Now we both had a show. So the covenant works that way. As you support each other, you share, press, you share venues, and everybody succeeds. And if you are just nice to everyone around you, and you are supportive of those other artists around you, and serve on those boards. By the way, serving on boards is a really good idea, because the collectors are clustered on the boards of these museums. That's where collectors live. So if you want to meet collectors, go to a board and volunteer on committees and start getting to know these people. Because I remember this one guy was sitting there talking, oh, they're just a bunch of old people. No, they're not. They have amazing lives before you ever met them. Ask them sometime about their lives. They're not just sitting home knitting and waiting for you to find them. They were, heads of corporations and lawyers, and they had amazing things in their life. So if you can get to that level and just start being on the boards and getting to know those other people, I think that's what'll keep you in good standing. Because all those, like Kevin's hiding on the board of the Asheville Art Museum, but there's lots of people who hide on boards, and they're not hiding; they're happily on boards, and that's where I met so many of the people. I went on those boards and met them.
So I have a personal question. You are welcome to refuse to answer it, but did you marry a glass artist?
Never. There aren't enough of them. I wish I could find one. Shoot, they're not. But I married the kindest, sweetest, most astounding man in the entire universe. So, and who has no idea, he has no idea of anything about my career, basically, even though we've been married for 11 years now. He couldn't tell you tomorrow what I'm making or what I'm doing or what shows I have. He's oblivious. So I go home to this other life because mine is so concentrated here. I have a softer. When I travel, I'm working. There we go. If I'm working, I'm traveling.
I think, were we supposed to end at 10:30? Because I'm realizing.
I think it's
fine if you go over a little bit. But thank you guys so much.
I was like, oh, we're just chatting away, Tim. Everyone.
And we visit you?
Please, if you ever want to say hi, I'm at Tim Tate Glass at AOL. You can always send me an email. You can come by the studio. I'm at the Washington Glass studio, and we have visitors constantly without, without end, but we always love having people come and see us. So if you want a tour of the studio, I'm talking to you, Kevin. Bring everybody, bring Ash, bring the wife, whoever you want. I'm here.
Want us to make appointments, or can we just drop in?
Please make an appointment. Yeah, please. I forgot to mention it. Please let me know when you're coming, because many times people have come and I'm not even in the building because we're running around installing and doing things like that. So do make sure that we know when you're coming, and we'll certainly make time for you. You just call and say, we're going to be there on the 2nd. I'll put you on the schedule, whatever it is. So Fred has been here too
Thank
many
you
times.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim, and thanks to the AOC for hosting this. This has been wonderful.
The accolades continue on the chat.
There we go.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Jamianne. It was absolutely phenomenal, as I knew it would be. I just want to remind you, everybody, that we'll be meeting again in 2 weeks. We have Sarah Jameson. She is a very detailed kind of colored pencilist, mixed media artist. So I encourage you to join us in 2 weeks and meet another fantastic D&D artist.
Sure.
And if you have not joined our newsletter, there should be information on our webpage, and then you can hear and get information on all the artists from the area that we present. Thank you again, Tim. Thank you, Jamianne. Thanks, Mariana.
Thank you, Jordan, Mariana, all you all.
Thank you.
And John, her son. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you so much.